Hello, everyone. We are 1 week away from the most exciting night of the year. That is the NFL draft. I can't believe it's already snuck up on us like this. It felt for a while like there was less buzz than usual. I feel like early April, it didn't feel like we were into draft month, but I would say that things have picked up this week, Alex, in terms of buzz around the league.
Yeah, it definitely seems like it. I think we posted our biggest rumor mill ever last Sunday. So if you haven't seen that, go check it out. But yeah, it definitely seems like things have picked up steam. I'm gonna guess it's because teams are kind of concluding their meetings or putting their finishing touches on their draft plans and stuff like that. So I think it's a kind of a great time to kind of talk about everything we've been hearing regarding the first round. And a great place to start is the quarterbacks. I think we all know Caleb Williams is going one to the Bears. For a while, I think two was up in the air, but it does kind of seem like the noise has settled on Jaden Daniels going number two to the Commanders.
Yeah, I would book it for Jayden Daniels going number 2 to the Commanders. It really seems like he's the guy that Cliff Kingsbury wants. Cliff Kingsbury's used to having a running quarterback. He had the Kyler Murray in Arizona, so I think that's the way they're going to go. And then the draft really starts at 3 with the New England Patriots, and I think we're still completely in the dark as to what the Patriots' plans are. Whether they trade down from 3 or stay put and presumably take Drake May. I think there's an outside chance it'd be JJ McCarthy, but if they stick and pick, I would think it's May. It just feels like between those two options, it could almost be a coin flip.
Yeah, I think regardless of who's picking there, I'm going to assume it's a quarterback. I
Mhm.
think, I don't think there's a way that the Patriots stay there and pick Marvin Harrison or Malik Neighbors,
Yeah.
regardless of how good we think they are of wide receiver prospects. You're going to get way too much in draft capital in return to allow a team to come up to 3 and pick a quarterback. So I do really think we're going to end up seeing quarterback there again. Drake May kind of to me makes more sense, but there has been some growing buzz about JJ McCarthy over the past couple of weeks. So it still is really up in the air with what the Patriots do and stuff like that.
I think what would make sense for the Patriots if their target was anybody but Drake May would be to trade that third pick to the Minnesota Vikings and then trade back up with the Arizona Cardinals at number 4. Monty Ossenfort spent a long time with the New England Patriots. Actually, he's now the Cardinals GM, so that there are some contacts there, and that way the Patriots would get their guy anyway and drop one pick overall in net some change in return. So I think there could be a good deal of wheeling and dealing in top half of round one. We could even potentially see the Patriots picking Drake May third, and then what if the Vikings are coming up to number 4 with the Cardinals, but the Cardinals really love, let's say, Marvin Harrison Jr., and then they come back up with the Chargers at 5, who have been heavily rumored to want to trade out. So I think that's another potential interesting scenario. And I guess my next question is, where does JJ McCarthy land if the Vikings trade up to 3 and take Drake May? Who's the McCarthy team after that?
I think the Broncos at 12. I
Mm,
think that makes a ton of sense. I mean, unless then the Patriots would be there at 11 if they like JJ McCarthy, because at that point they might not
yeah.
need to trade up. Um, but I think we've heard some things about how either Sean Payton really likes JJ McCarthy or JJ McCarthy is a perfect fit in that excuse me, that Sean Payton offense. So I think 12 might be JJ McCarthy's floor.
Yeah.
Um, I do kind of want to talk about the Vikings though, because when they
Mm,
made this trade, was it almost a month and a half ago now? Um, we kind of talked about that. Oh, we expect them to move up well before the draft.
mm.
Because they've put a target on their back now. Everyone knows that they're trying to move up for a quarterback. And to me, it just doesn't really make sense why they haven't made a move yet. Unless, you know, the Patriots are I understand why the Patriots might not want to move back. They want to see what happens at 1 and 2 and ahead of them. Maybe they like Jaden Daniels and not Drake May. They want to stay there in case Daniels is available at 3. I understand that. For the Cardinals, again, maybe, you know, I find it hard to believe that the Cardinals are 100% set on taking Marvin Harrison Jr. And if I were the Vikings, I would have already traded up to 4. That guarantees you one of those top 4 quarterbacks. Would I take JJ McCarthy at 4th overall? No, but it's a quarterback and it's the NFL draft. That's what happens. There's that target on that the Giants could move up 2 spots. The Raiders could move up. The Broncos, they don't have a ton of draft capital, but if they really wanted to, they could. And they could jump the Vikings. I think the Vikings not having already made a move up to at least 4, because then you could go from 4 to 3 if Drake May was available at 3. Um, I think they put a target on their back. They've increased the value of the 4th overall pick because they're going to be bidding against everyone else on draft night. And I still expect them to come out of this with a quarterback, but there are plenty of scenarios where they don't. And then they're kind of stuck thinking, why do we wait?
Mhm.
So it's just kind of an interesting scenario to me of why they haven't moved up, unless they've, you know, maybe they have a deal together with the Patriots. The Patriots have said, hey, if Drake May is available at 3, you can move up. And then they also have a deal with the Cardinals at 4. Hey, if we don't move up to 3, we'll move up to 4. That's the only thing that makes sense to me. But again, it's not set in stone, so really anything can happen.
Yeah, honestly, I'm still pretty confused by the Vikings trade because I would imagine it was with the intention of trading into the top 3 because one, I think the top 3 quarterbacks are on a different tier than JJ McCarthy, and 2, because I would imagine there would be more competition to trade into those picks. You really, and especially with the teams that are currently in those slots, I think you really have to give a king's ransom to the Patriots to move out of the 3rd pick. I just don't understand what the Vikings thought process is if they don't manage to trade with New England, if they're left out of the top 3. And we just said the next team that aren't the Vikings outside the top 3 that we think would draft JJ McCarthy are the Denver Broncos at 12. And that's 1 spot behind the Vikings. I think the only other team in the top 10 picks in front of the Vikings between 4 and 10 that could draft JJ McCarthy would be the Giants. But
Mm-hmm.
I had a gut feeling that that it got stronger and stronger the last few weeks that in that situation the Giants would pass on McCarthy and maybe they would take a Malik Neighbors. I think it's still possible, but I don't really feel that that's the way the leaves are blowing for the Giants. So then in that situation, the Vikings traded for an extra first rounder, and then what was that for? I mean, conceivably they could trade up like with the Bears at number 9, who the Bears, by the way, are a big trade down candidate from there because they only have 4 picks in the draft. And they would do that maybe just to ensure that the Broncos don't jump them. But you're not going to give up pick 23, which you acquired in that trade with the Texans for that. So overall, I think this is just a big headache for a mock drafter. And I'm excited to see what's going to happen. I don't think there's ever going to have been as much drama just having your eyes glued to the screen on draft night and just to see, is trade going to pop up or is it going to be the pick is in for the first like 6, 7 picks?
Yeah, it's going to be, really, really interesting. Kind of moving back a little bit, you mentioned the Giants. I kind of feel like it's 50-50 if JJ
Mm-hmm.
McCarthy's there. They've obviously done a lot of work on all these quarterbacks. It could just be complete smoke to try to get one of the wide receivers to fall to them. But I mean, unless you have a massive grade difference between Neighbors and Adunze, you're going to get one of those 2 guys if QBs go 1, 2, 3, and then wide receivers go 1, 2, 3.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, it doesn't seem. I don't believe that they're doing it just to make a wide receiver fall to them, because they're going to get one of the top 3 wide receivers regardless of what happens. It seems like you're putting so many resources into this quarterback situation. I feel like they do have an interest in it. Whether they pull the trigger on draft night, I feel like it's been murky. I think we've seen the Giants are going to take a quarterback if there's one there, and people have said the Giants are going to pass. So it's really interesting. But Peter Schrager did have them trading up to 4 in his mock draft,
Mm-hmm.
and he has been pretty plugged in with the league for a handful of years. So it definitely interesting conversation with the Giants.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so moving on with let's say with the Chargers, we've heard some conflicting reports where everyone's the one thing everyone's in agreement on is the Chargers want to trade down. But let's say maybe it's the Cardinals that end up trading down, and so nobody is in high demand for get that fifth pick. They have to stick and pick for whatever reason. Who do you think that pick is? Because we've long thought that it's going to be a tackle and that Joel is tackle one, but Benjamin Albright, who has been pretty plugged in and reliable, has consistently said he doesn't think that Joel is that guy, that OT one for the Chargers. And I think Alt's the best tackle, but I think they really want to establish the run game, especially, and he might not be the strongest run blocker of that top group of tackles. So I'd buy that he's not their first tackle, but then what's the plan there?
Yeah. I mean, the Chargers kind of strike me as a team that would trade down for less than ideal value, just because they don't like any of the guys in that spot. I think if I've heard some things about Fuaga,
Mm,
and they're trying to establish a really good run game. He
yeah,
has that guard tackle versatility that makes a lot of sense to me. I would be shocked if they take him at 5 if they don't get any trade offers. But then again, going back to Peter Schrager, he mentioned that if Marvin Harrison Jr. is there at 5, which would happen if QBs go 1 through 4, they would take Marvin Harrison Jr. So the Chargers are, again, like the Patriots, really anybody's guess whether they are able to trade down. And then if they end up taking a tackle or a wide receiver, it's, again, really difficult position to be in when you're trying to create a mock draft when we're not really sure if a team's going to be able to trade down or not.
yeah. And in the back half of the top 10, there seemed to be really consensus on which guy is going to go to which team. I mean, at 7, you've got the Titans, and everyone seems to be thinking Joe Alt. At 8, you've got the Falcons, Dallas Turner. 9, the Bears, Roma Dunze, and 10, the Jets with Brock Bowers. It seems like at least 3/4 of NFL draft media has those specific players to those teams. And I don't know if I've ever really remembered that many picks in the 7 to 10 range having consensus at this point. So I wonder if that's going to come to fruition or not.
I doubt it. It never did. I feel
Yeah.
like the 7 through like 12 range every year, I feel really good about those picks. I'm like, okay, these make a ton of sense.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of top guys on the board left
Hmm.
because usually, in my opinion, there's usually like, you know 7 or 8 like top talents, and then there's always a quarterback or two that's overdrafted, pushing those top talents down. Like, oh, these guys are going to be the pick. It makes too much sense,
Yeah.
and then they never happen.
Yeah.
So I think Bijan at 8, we felt really confident about that happened. But it's a weird spot because there's guys that fall that we didn't expect to fall. And there's
Yeah, and
guys
trades could easily mess it all up too.
exactly.
Yeah, or
Yeah,
like it's such a domino effect. One trade or one off the wall pick people weren't expecting, and then it's going to ripple down through the rest of the draft order.
Yeah, and I mean, we hear that the Falcons might be interested in trading back now. The Bears at 9, I would highly expect them to be interested in trading back now. And one trade that I kind of been thinking about for the past week or so, after hearing the Bears want to trade back, the Jets are really interested in Brock Bowers. Also hearing that the Colts would run in the card at 15 if Brock Bowers was available. I started thinking about maybe the Colts hopping up a couple spots to take Bowers at 9. I did see a report also, or it wasn't from anyone reliable, but it was just the mention of the Colts possibly trading up for Bowers, and that's kind of what kickstarted me thinking, oh, maybe they trade to 9 because it, again, connecting the puzzle pieces. That probably won't be put in my mock because a trade from 15 to 9 is just kind of
Yeah.
crazy to project in your final mock draft when we're
Mhm.
trying to get as many picks correct as possible. But just an interesting mid first round trade to think about a little bit.
Yeah, I think that would be pretty interesting. I'm not sure. I think picking a tight end in the top 10 is already something that goes against NFL norms. So then trading up for one, especially one where we haven't even gotten verified testing numbers, I think he's athletic as hell, but I think overall that just might be a little too much. So I wonder where Bowers goes. It seems like the Jets are a popular destination. If not that, then maybe he'd go to the Broncos at 12. But I think then you're getting into the teens and things are really then start becoming pretty unpredictable where I think tackles are going to fly off the board and I'm interested to see in what order. And I'm starting to feel like and this is echoed by people around the league. I would think that Amarius Mims and Tyler Guyton might slide a little bit just
Mhm.
because these guys are really inexperienced and they have all the talent in the world. And I have solid first round grades on both of them. But I think the inexperience and for Mims, the lack of testing as well is just going to push them down. I mean, when you're talking about Mims, it's a guy with 8 career starts without testing numbers. So at this point, I'm starting to even wonder is he going to go round one? I mean, every year there are guys we think are round one locks who don't go round one. And I know Lance Zierlein mentioned he might be one of those guys. I think at the end of the day, you'll have a team in the 20s that has the luxury to be able to take a swing on him, and I absolutely would do that. I think for me, he's a top 20 player because he's just such a rare talent. But I'm just interested in how those tackles are going to stack, and I feel like that could push those two guys down the board.
Yeah, I think in other drafts as well, they might not fall as much as they would this year because there's so many other good tackles that are worthy of being first round picks that also have a lot more experience. I think we have Joe Walt, we have
Mm-hmm.
Olu Fashino, Talisi Fuaga, to name the top three.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and I think without three of those guys, maybe if you had two, you might not see Mims fall. And then you also have guys like Fountain and
JC
other
Latham.
guys like that. Yeah, Latham. So those are five, you
Mm-hmm.
know, in my opinion, first round talents at tackle. So that's why I think those guys are going to fall. But I agree. I think Mims. I think they both probably end up going round one. I think Mims has a little bit better of a chance just because he's so rare, like you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
But it'll just be really interesting to see where all these tackles go and when the run on tackles starts.
Yeah, definitely. I think one team I would watch out for in the teens that could get active would be the Los Angeles Rams. It feels like they're an organization that's not afraid to do things differently from anyone else. They this is their first time picking in the first round since 2016, and they have a lot of draft picks, more than they need, honestly, especially after they knocked their draft out of the park last year. Last year they didn't have a first rounder, but they had so many picks on day 2 and 3, and they got a good core of young talent. I wouldn't be surprised if they use some of that ammo to move up now that they finally are in the first round, and maybe they go grab one of these tackles. Or let's say Dallas Turner doesn't go eighth and they have a need at edge, they can move up as well. So that's one team I'd watch out for. On top of the Bills, because the Bills trading up for Brian Thomas is just a trade that makes a lot of sense. Because if I was them, there's a big wide receiver need, and I would not be comfortable asking a guy like AD Mitchell or Xavier Worthy to come in and be my number one. I wouldn't even love doing that with Brian Thomas, but I think he's a cut above those guys.
Yeah, I think if you're gonna pick two teams that I would put money on moving up in the draft, if I had to, it would be the Vikings and the Bills. I mean,
Mm.
the Bills have really no wide receiver one. And not to discount any of the players that they have, but they really need a big time target for Josh Allen. So it will be interesting to see what happens because in my opinion, there's the big three at wide receiver. And then there's Brian Thomas, I really like him as a player, but he's a fourth behind those three. And then there's the next tier of guys. So Brian Thomas, in my opinion, could go as high as mid teens, or he could end up falling to the early 20s. But I'd kind of be shocked to see him fall all the way to the Bills
It
without
could
a trade up.
happen. I think it's possible, maybe not likely, but crazier things have happened. One thing with the
Of
Bills
course.
that I think this is just like having fun right now, thinking of scenarios. But we saw the Falcons trade from the bottom reaches of round one way up into the top 10 for Julio Jones a long time ago. Imagine they really fell in love with Malik Neighbors or Rome Odunze, understandably so, and they decide to pull the trigger because they are now, with Stephon Diggs gone, in a dire need of a wide receiver one, a real alpha guy who's going to be a Pro Bowler.
They could move up to 8 or 9. I mean, both of those teams, especially 9. I obviously would have to give up next year's first round pick, but if you're the Bills, you're expecting your first round pick to be late 20s or
Yeah.
you know the 30s, 30, 31, 32. So I mean, if I were the Bills, I would make that move.
Mhm.
Because I haven't looked at the Bills roster in a little while, but I don't think they have a ton of needs outside of wide receiver. They have a solid
Well,
offensive
their
line.
roster got a little depleted because they had to let go some guys for cap
Oh,
casualties.
you're right. You're right. You're right. But again, I mean, you need that
Mhm.
number one receiver, so I would still probably make that trade if I were the Bills. So that's another interesting thing to look at, them jumping up to 8 or 9 because both those teams are looking to move down.
Yeah, definitely. I think what on the maybe we'll stop talking about trades for a bit, but there's been a lot of reports that the worst kept secret in the draft is the Washington Commanders, who have 2 picks early in round 2, looking to trade back up into round 1 for a tackle, and it makes perfect sense. You draft Jaden Daniels at number 2. He's a rookie. He's going to be a rookie quarterback. He's on the thinner side. You want to keep him upright. Go get one of these top tackles, and whichever one starts to slide. Maybe it's Mims. Maybe, JC Latham ends up sliding because he might not be as scheme versatile as some of the other guys. You just go up and get him, and that really would bode well for Jaden Daniels' development.
Yeah, I mean, even if they don't trade up, I know Jordan Morgan might not end up being there, but I'm pretty sure that we've seen a couple people say that his floor is the Commanders' second round pick. So
Mhm.
I would definitely um, think that tackle is number 2 on their board outside of quarterback.
Yeah, definitely. So looking in the back half of round 1, there's obviously less reports linking teams to specific players, but are there a couple fits that you've thought of that you feel pretty confident in that, that those might be picks that you've already filed away in your mind for your final mock draft in a week?
Yeah, I won't give you the player
Mhm.
because we like to keep our mock drafts as different as possible. But I think Steelers going
Yeah.
offensive line is almost a near lock. It seems like everybody has said that, and whether they end up taking a tackle or an interior guy,
That's the
uh,
big question, I think. Is it tackle or
yeah,
interior? Yeah.
or I think if it's tackle, it's going to be whichever one of the top guys falls. I think Mims could make a lot of sense. They like Broderick Jones last year
Yeah.
from Georgia.
Yeah.
But if it's interior guy, it'll be interesting to see whether they take uh, somebody like Jackson Powers Johnson or Graham Barton has kind of flown up draft boards a little bit. So it'll be interesting to see
I'll
which.
I'll tell you that my guy in mind for the Steelers is Graham Barton. I think
All right,
that
that is also my
yeah,
guy, but I
I
wasn't
think
going to
that's
say that.
he's
Yeah,
been connected to the Steelers, and they have
yes.
a need at tackle and a need at center, and they could presumably imagine that he could fill one or the other or be a depth piece that could swing from one to the other in case of an emergency, and it would just makes a good deal of sense.
Yeah, yeah, he was also the guy that I had in mind. Um, Looking at some other teams in the back, we haven't heard a ton about this, but to me, Eagles going cornerback makes a lot of
Mhm.
sense.
Yeah.
I think there's going to be a cornerback there. Um, I think Mitchell and Arnold will probably be gone.
It's
But
it's such a Howie Roseman thing for one of them to fall into his lap.
it is, it
It
is.
could happen.
Um, but I think we might end up seeing um, a guy like Cooper DeJean fall there, maybe Nate Wiggins. Um, those guys, I have a 2.0 or 2.1 on DeJean and a late first round grade on Wiggins. So I think I'd be fine with either of those picks um, with the Eagles. And I think from the little that we've heard out of the Eagles, it sounds like cornerback might be an area that they would be looking. But
Mhm.
now I don't know if you've seen the reports about AJ Brown potentially being on the trade block.
I've heard
I
that,
don't believe it.
yeah.
It's just odd that it happened right after they paid Devontae Smith, but I think it would be a mistake to trade AJ Brown.
Yeah.
But maybe if they did, that could be a spot for Brian Thomas.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, potentially. I think talking about the cornerbacks, that's as we're building our final positional rankings, that might be the position I'm having the toughest time with because I think that battle for corner one between Arnold and Mitchell is really as close as it could get. And then after that, I've got like 5, 6 guys that are right at the round 1, 2 turn. So I'm
Mhm.
trying to figure out how to order them and whether to give them the late first or the early second, which makes a difference. You want to feel good about who you're giving a first round grade to. So I've got like Nate Wiggins, Cooper DeJean, um, even TJ Tampa is a guy that I really like. He's in that range. And Ennis Rakestraw, Kamari Lassiter. These are all like late first, early second guys, and I just got to figure out how to stack them. And so that'll be interesting. And I think it'll be interesting to see which teams are going to feel which ways about them. And I thought Cooper DeJean did something a little sly where he decided to run the 40 and jump, but not do anything like a 3-cone or a short shuttle, which involves changing direction. And I think that he definitely accentuated his athletic strengths there and hid what some questions might be about whether or not he can turn and lose anything in transition when he's flipping his hips.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure how you feel about Cooper DeJean.
Mm-hmm. I like
I'm
him.
still a little bit
I think he's going
torn.
to be a playmaker, honestly. I
Oh,
don't want to overthink him.
100%. I'm a little bit torn about whether he would be best suited as a safety or a cornerback. Just when I watched him the first time, I felt like, not that he's going to be a bad corner by any means. I'm just curious if his strengths will make him a better safety than it would a corner.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the limited ability and change of direction that you didn't see doing the 3-cone drill, I think that might better suit him at safety. And, that could play to a team's strengths that has need at both positions. And
Mm-hmm.
I think the Eagles might have that, especially with a guy like Sidney Brown who's hurt,
Yeah.
who ended up starting at safety last year for them. You start him at safety, Sidney Brown comes back, you move him to corner. But I think he'd be good in both spots. I'm just a little hesitant on he might end up being a better safety than he is corner.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think that might just help his case because it
Mhm.
makes him more versatile. I think one last conversation we can have on here is something that we posted about where we asked people for which surprise first rounders they think are going to happen because every year you see one of these guys. I mean, be it Cole Strange or Peyton Turner or LJ Collier. Usually there's a shocker where it's a name that nobody expected. And we had a really good shout. I thought about it, didn't really bring it up as someone who we might want to include, but you pointed it out. Marshawn Nealon, defensive end from Western Michigan. I feel like it's probably just a gut feeling for both of us. And sure enough, you got guys like Dane Brugler now saying he might indeed slide into the first round. So I think that's one guy.
Yeah, I think a guy that is in a less talented position this year, the linebackers. Um, I think we both like Edgerrin Cooper more than he's been
Mhm.
discussed.
Yeah,
And you have a late first round grade on
I
him, but
do.
the
Yeah.
other linebacker that I think we've heard the most first round buzz a lot about, albeit it hasn't been that much, has been Peyton Wilson.
Mhm.
The tape was great, but his injuries really, really concern me.
Yeah.
He's in a car crash position, basically the running back of the defensive side of the ball, and he had 2 knee injuries and 2 shoulder surgeries. I don't feel comfortable drafting a guy like that in the first or second round, but if teams are comfortable with his medicals, uh, I wouldn't be shocked to see him as a really late round 1 guy or early round 2 guy.
Yeah, I would understand that. I think another guy that could sneak in there is Mikey Sanders still, just
Yep.
because he's done everything right in this process. I mean, he has outstanding character reports. One thing that really was eye opening for me is I forget. I think it was maybe Dane Brugler and the other guys at the Athletic. They did a pod where they said that a scout told them that he asked every player at Michigan when they came in for the interviews at the combine who was the leader in that locker room. And everyone on both sides of the ball said Mike Sanders still, the nickel cornerback. It wasn't McCarthy. It wasn't Corum. It wasn't Colson, Jenkins, or really anyone else. It was Mikey Sanders still. And I think that's going to weigh on teams. He's also been playing cornerback only for the last couple of years. And
True.
so you're going to bank on a developmental curve there and the arrow pointing up. And one thing I thought was interesting is at his pro day, he ended up working out as a wide receiver as well, because that's the
Mhm.
position he transitioned from. And he wowed scouts and now is potentially being seen as a two-way player. So he's turning into maybe the most interesting player in the draft. And I think he's going to go high. If he gets out of the first round, he won't last past the first 15 picks.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if the Chargers took him with their second round pick. I
Are
think
they, are they going to take him or
or
Colson or
Colson. Yeah, I
Jenkins?
was just gonna say that him or
All three of
Colson.
them.
Yeah, I mean, if the Chargers trade back and get a second round
Mhm.
pick, I mean, when we do our 7 round mock, I was just gonna
Right.
throw Michigan players at the
Oh,
Chargers
absolutely.
because it
Do you
makes so
think
much sense.
that Corum to the Chargers is off the board after them signing J.K. Dobbins now that they have Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins?
No,
No.
I mean, you don't. J.K. Dobbins
Business
hasn't
style
proven that
too.
he's been healthy.
Yeah.
Gus Edwards is. I don't know how old Edwards is, but he's been running the ball for
Mhm.
a handful of years now.
Yeah.
Um, I wouldn't be
He's
surprised.
29. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
29. Yeah, so he's not the long-term answer.
Yeah.
Not that Corum's going to be the long-term answer either, but Gus Edwards for a year and then Blake Corum and maybe J.K. Dobbins gets healthy. That could be an interesting 1-2
Mhm.
punch for the Chargers. But just kind of looking through the first round draft order and kind of thinking about what a handful of other teams might end up doing. I think Detroit and Baltimore have been some teams that we haven't heard too much about, but I have heard specific players connected to them.
Mm. Mm.
Um, Darius Robinson to both
Both of
teams,
them. Yeah.
the Lions and the Ravens, and then we've also heard Jordan Morgan to the Ravens as well. So if you're putting together a mock, the late first round teams never really have too many names connected to them. So I just found it interesting that both the Lions and the Ravens had not many rumors, but they all kind of mentioned the same names. So just be
Yeah.
interesting to see what happens there. And both those teams could also end up being a team that trades out for a team that wants to move up for that fifth year option.
Yeah, I think Morgan is good. It's really interesting because he's been connected left and right to teams
Yep.
in that late first, early second round range. He might have the narrowest range ever of a player that's not projected in the first 20 picks because it really seems like several teams are interested in him in that range. I think one last thing I want to talk about before we get off the air is maybe the most volatile draft ranges on the other side of the spectrum would be those of Michael Penix and Bo Nix. What do you think either of them goes in the first round?
If I had to bet money on it, I would go with no.
I agree.
Based off of my scouting that I've done, based off of what the people that I believe to be the most reliable when it comes to draft rumors being Benjamin Albright, um, and then for at least for Knicks, Charlie Campbell has kind of been on top of that for a while. That
Yeah,
Knicks
but
isn't
Campbell
going round
Campbell
one.
thinks
He
Penix is
thinks
going
Penix
13
is going round one. He for a while he said
to the Raiders.
no,
Yeah.
and then yeah, he mentioned Penix to the Raiders, possibly at 13, but maybe they move up into the top end of round two.
Yeah. I'll
I
tell you
don't
what
think either one goes. Go ahead.
this feels like for me with Penix is when everyone had Drew Lock to the Broncos at pick 10 in the first round in 2019 was that? And we all knew the Broncos liked him and they just took him in round 2 because nobody else was going to take him in round 1. I think that could be the deal with the Raiders and Michael Penix where they
Mhm.
could just get him at their pick in round 2. If there is somebody else in round 2 that's going to take him, they could trade up into the end of round 1 or early round 2. That's possible too. Bo Nix could be the quarterback that really falls a lot. I think each year we in the last 10 days before the draft, we hear buzz of there's going to be this extra quarterback in the first round that we weren't
Will
projecting.
Levis.
Like Will Levis, like going back to Christian Hackenberg, even Davis Webb, even before that. I mean, all these guys who had first round mock projections the week of the draft, and it just usually doesn't happen. So I'm going to guess that like maybe like Malik Willis, who we thought was going to go first round and went in the third. That could happen to Bo Nix, and we're connecting him to the Broncos, but then everyone's saying, but they don't have a second round pick. What if the big surprise in the first 2 days of the draft is that Bo Nix goes in the third round to the Broncos, and that's just how far he falls?
Yeah, eh, because unless the Vikings were to miss out on a quarterback, I don't see another team that would view Nix as a starting franchise quarterback other than the
Mhm.
Broncos. I think Nix fits into that Sean Payton system really well. He kind of plays the position as a point guard, distributing the ball really well, progresses through his reads, stuff like that. Um, and he'll do exactly what you ask him to. So I think if the Vikings get their guy, uh, I'm not sure there's going to be another team that views him as a guy that they want as their starting quarterback. You might
Yeah.
have to take him.
Mhm.
Another team might have to take him and say, he's the best we got. But I think the Broncos, would view him as at least a potential long-term starting quarterback. Not saying he gets there, but view him
Mhm.
as, we'll take the chance on that.
Yeah.
Um, Go ahead.
This is pure speculation, but I feel like the Rams could have some interest in Bo Nix. Just thinking of what Sean McVay is looking for, it's pretty similar to what Peyton is with what Matt Stafford is stylistically. I feel like if he was there in the second round, maybe they pull the trigger. Or I think it's just kind of trying to scratch our heads and see where else Bo Nix could
The
fit.
question with the Rams is, do they give it one more shot? I think if they want to give it a chance to make another Super Bowl run with Stafford, no way they take Nix in the second round, just because that's going to be a pick where you could get a starter. Um, and I think if they were to move up in the first, to me that would signal, okay, we're trying to make another run this year, and wouldn't
Well,
expect
that
them
being
to do
said, they
that.
have a lot of picks, and they had a lot of picks last year, and there's only so many roster spots. So even if they acknowledge their window is closed, they could look for doing that. I think one thing that I wonder how much that is weighing in Sean McVay's mind is he just lost like multiple high ranking assistants in that on that coaching staff, including defensive coordinator Raheem Morris, who took a head coaching job elsewhere. And didn't Zach Robinson leave as well?
Yeah, he's
Yeah,
with Atlanta, right? Yeah, he followed
maybe.
Raheem Morris to
Yeah.
Atlanta.
So I wonder if that might push McVay a little more into a rebuild mode. It'll be interesting to see.
Yeah. If I had to guess right now, I say the top four quarterbacks go in the top five. I'm not gonna
I'm not sold on McCarthy going that high. I'm just
I'm
not.
not gonna say they go 1, 2, 3, 4. I
Mhm.
think they go because I think that the Patriots take Drake May at 3.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And then if that happens, I think if the Vikings trade up, there's a lot bigger chance that McCarthy falls. I think if quarterbacks go 1, 2, 3 without any trades, I think JJ McCarthy goes in the top 5.
One last thing that really caught my attention was in Charlie Campbell's report talking about JJ McCarthy and where he could go. He mentioned obviously the Vikings could trade up, but then he mentioned the Raiders potentially could trade up. And what really piqued my interest is he mentioned the Chargers as a trade candidate, and he acknowledged that this is a trade within the division, but said that he thinks the Chargers would be willing to do it. And that blows my mind because if
The-
Harbaugh
yeah,
coached McCarthy, and if he thinks the world of him, he would never, ever, ever trade that pick within the division.
he
So
would
if
he
that were to
would
be
trade out
true,
to the Vikings because he
exactly.
wouldn't want him in his
Chances
division.
are this is not going to see the light of day, and this won't even be a realistic draft scenario. But if somehow that happened, that's alarm bells on JJ McCarthy. It has to be if Harbaugh was willing to do that.
If if you're the Raiders, is it even worth calling the Chargers? Because if he's what you think, if he is what the Raiders think he is, the Chargers aren't going to trade him to
Well,
the Raiders.
you trust your scouting over anyone else's. I see what you're saying though.
I mean, you do, but you also trust the guy that's been his coach for 3 years, and maybe there's something that you couldn't see while scouting. I
Yeah. No, I
I
see what
think
you're
he's
saying. It's
got high
interesting.
character. It's
Yeah.
from everything it seems like. He's a great person. He's really smart,
Mm.
and I like the tape enough to take him in the first round. But I feel like it's a lose-lose situation because if they say, "Oh yeah, we'll make that trade with you," you should have some red flags going off in your head, like you said, of wait a minute, why is Jim Harbaugh willing to trade this guy that he said should be the first overall pick into his division and have to play him two
Yeah.
times a year?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I guess you have to call, but like if they're willing to make the trade, should you do it?
Mm.
So it's just interesting. I think the top four, like I said, go in the top five. And then I think Penix goes in round two. Bo Nix possibly goes in round 3.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
3 weeks ago, I would have thought that Nix goes before Penix, but I think it's flipped now.
Yeah. And I think that's possible. All right. Well, we're a week out from the draft. We'll be finishing up our positional rankings and then getting to you guys our big board. So that'll be either our top 75 or our top 100s compiled. We'll also be having a rumor mill on Sunday, but that will not be the final one. We'll get a bonus rumor mill out to you guys. Know you guys love those, and those are crucial for your mock drafts. We'll put that out next Wednesday, day before the draft, or maybe even the day of the draft. We'll figure that one out. And then obviously draft day, you'll get both of our mock drafts side by side, and may the best man win.
Oh, yeah. You beat my streak last year, so
Yeah.
I got to get it back.
Yep.
All right, but regardless of who wins, I think I feel pretty confident that ours will be up there with the top. I think we've done that for a handful of years, and we do a lot of research into all the rumors. So be sure to check out who we put in our mock drafts when they come out. So thanks everyone for watching. Thanks for listening. Have a fun week leading up to the draft, and then yeah, it's almost here.